So, how is it that firms collude? We said that there are two broad types. Yeah? One is tacit collusion. Yeah? Tacit literally means silent or unspoken. Yeah, so there's no formal agreement. There's no formal agreement between the firms. What they do, is they act in one another's interests. So, some ways in which this might come about. A couple of ways in which tacit collusion. A couple of examples. One might be price leadership. And price leadership is simply where one firm, often the larger firm in the market, sends a signal to another. And we can illustrate that again using game theory. Suppose we were here in the Nash equilibrium, 30-45 in this grid. Obviously, both firms are suffering. They have relatively low prices because they're trapped in a price war. What might happen is that one firm might send a signal to the other, saying, "I would like to escape this." In other words, it might try to act as a price leader. So what might happen is if we take B, B might simply say, "Well, look, actually, I've got a lot to gain. If I can get up to 160, then I've got a lot to gain from this market. And maybe I can lead A in that direction. Maybe I can set a price as a signal." So what might happen is that B might decide simply to go high. A benefits massively from this, but B in the short run is only losing out by 5. So sure, strictly they shouldn't, because they're losing. But what they're doing is, again, they're thinking about this idea of a super game. They're thinking, well, if I send that signal, what will A do? A now has a choice. Try and keep prices high, but assuming that A doesn't think that I'm stupid, and again, this is interdependence, A will realise that B is trying to do something here, that they haven't just randomly decided to make A rich for the sake of it. A will probably realise that B is sending a signal. They're acting as a leader. So in the first round, we go here. So we end up, we start there, then we go to here at the end of the first round. But in the second round, probably, A will realise, that really they have a choice of trying to stay here, which won't work, or cooperating with B, and also putting their prices high. And so then we escape the Nash equilibrium because B has acted as a price leader. They've moved their price first to signal to A, that we can both end up better off by ending up at B. But that's almost impossible to prove. We haven't spoken to one another. We're just taking advantage of interdependence. Well, I'm working out that you're smart, therefore you'll read my signal. So price leadership, simply where, kind of one firm, changes their price, sending as a signal to another. And secondly, simply, a failure to expand is another form of tacit collusion. It's often been observed but never proven that in some, particularly in transport, airlines or buses, firms tend to stick to their existing routes. So if I fly London to Miami and you fly, London to New York, often I could go and compete with you by flying to New York, but I know that if I do that, you might well simply retaliate by flying to Miami. So we simply stay in our own areas. We just don't expand our empires into where other businesses are. And again, that's a form of collusion because we're simply not offering consumers choice. Can a regulator do anything about that? Can they insist that I start flying to New York? Well, of course they can't. So I am colluding, effectively, but I'm doing so tacitly. I'm simply saying quietly to myself, well, if I don't go and compete with this person, they won't come and compete with me. So again, those are tacit forms of collusion. Very difficult to prove that this is what's going on, and often a regulator, rather than trying to prove collusion, they may simply say, in the case of price leadership, you've got to cut your prices. And I'm not saying that there is collusion going on here, but it's not in the public interest. Overt collusion is where regulators are much more likely to get involved. So here we actually have formal agreements between firms, and these can come in a variety of different forms. So the most obvious one is output coordination. And this is often the case, in markets where firms are selling very, very similar products, and they simply agree to restrict the amount of output to drive up price. A classic example would be OPEC, where they actually have, OPEC actually has oil quotas. The members of OPEC agree how much oil they're actually going to produce. Sometimes you'll get actual price fixing. So we talked about price leadership before. But sometimes firms will simply agree to fix prices. They'll simply agree that what they're going to do is have high prices, and they will go on record or quiet. There will be actual evidence of an agreement between these firms. Other ones include what's called bid rigging. So this is quite common in the construction or building industry, where if I want a major building constructed for me, then what I'll try to do is to get quotes from a number of potential builders, number of potential suppliers. But if they're working together, they will simply agree in advance which of them is going to win the contract. So suppose that a reasonable price for my building is 10 million quid. I don't know this, because I don't know anything about building. I go to three firms, A, B, and C, and they simply agree that C is going to win. So A says, I'll build this building that should be 10 million. They say, I'll do it for 17. B says, I'll do it for 18. And C says, do your deal. I'll do it for 15. So I kind of go, oh, great, 15. That's much cheaper than the other two, without realizing that I'm being ripped off. So again, they are coordinating. They're coordinating their bids for this contract. To make sure that one of them wins. Next time it'll be somebody else's turn, and so on, and therefore they make more profit. Information sharing is another one, where we simply work together, to exploit consumers. Independent schools were accused of doing this about 20 years ago by telling one another what their fees were going to be for the next academic year, so they could all agree and make sure that they weren't too out of step with one another. So collusion can be either tacit or overt. Overt is these formal agreements that can cover things like price or output or just kind of contract winning. All collusion is illegal, but tacit is much harder to prove than overt. Here, there's often records somewhere that regulators can find out about.